The Book of Boba Fett is here. The first episode of the new series premiered earlier today, and my reaction to it is mixed, mostly positive, and still optimistic about future episodes. This is a challenging story to tell, because we have the crime lord story, which is easily the more interesting part to me, but the way Fett was reintroduced in The Mandalorian left fans with a lot of questions. Nobody really wants another somehow Boba Fett has returned moment, so we're dealing with a lot of flashbacks that, in my opinion, drag the rest of the episode down. It's tough because before this series began, I straight up had a list of questions I wanted answers for. How did Boba Fett survive the Sarlacc? Where has he been for the past 5 years? Why didn't he take his armor back from Cobb Vanth earlier? How did he track Din to Tython? The first episode made some good headway. We learned how he survived and some of what he did, but I wish those scenes didn't take up so much of the series premiere. Before I go too far down that rabbit hole, I have a feeling, or at least some hope, that when we get to the end of the season, I will look back at this episode and more clearly see what's being established and why. That happens to me a lot. I remember in The Bad Batch, I wasn't crazy about the first episode that featured Hera, but then the second part of the arc came out and I was like, oh, I get it now. I think the Book of Boba Fett is going to be more serialized than The Mandalorian, with each episode directly building off the previous one. So right now, I'm only judging 1/7 of a story, and that's not fair. Watching this actually reminded me a lot of watching the first chapters of The Mandalorian, because I just didn't know what to expect from that show. I definitely didn't get the side quest with the Jawas and the Mudhorn on my first viewing, and I had to let go of what I thought The Mandalorian was going to be and adjust into what it actually was, and then I had a blast with it. So right now, I'm adjusting to the pacing of this series. But let's actually talk about what happened in the episode, and I guess I'll break it apart into flashbacks and present day. I did really like the quick shots of Kamino and Geonosis. I'm still not fully used to stories set in this era connecting back to the prequels, especially this strongly. In the early days after the Disney acquisition, it sometimes felt like the prequels were straight up ignored, and I'll be honest, Attack of the Clones is my least favorite Star Wars movie, but I still loved seeing the storms on Kamino and the recreation of young Boba Fett looking at the helmet of his father. Those shots definitely left me wanting more. The escape from the Sarlacc was good. I'm glad they didn't linger on that too much. He escapes. Got it. Quick and simple, and we can move on. He's mugged by Jawas and captured by the Tusken Raiders, and this is the stuff I was most lukewarm about. It immediately seemed like The Last Samurai or one of those stories where the outsider is taken prisoner but eventually earns the respect of his captors, and that's exactly what happens. Boba eventually faces and defeats this Ray Harryhausen-looking sand creature. I liked that the Tusken child took credit for it when they got back to camp, that was funny, but the chief recognizes the truth and offers Fett water. I also like that defeating the creatures of the desert is 100% a way to earn respect from the Tuskens. It's a rite of passage in their culture, it all makes sense, I just felt like it dragged. But to challenge my own feelings, did we actually learn something new about Boba Fett through this ordeal? I think the answer kind of depends on what kind of Star Wars fan you ask. I have to remind myself all the time that not everyone has the same Star Wars experience as me, or probably you watching this channel. It's kind of like when Solo came out and all my friends were confused about Maul's appearance, and I'm over here like, yeah, he's been back for years, I thought everyone knew that. This episode is a reintroduction of Boba Fett for a lot of Star Wars fans who might not have known he survived the Sarlacc pit until he showed up in The Mandalorian, whereas I've been used to that idea since the 90s. Boba Fett's survival was never really a question to me, but this episode and the flashbacks specifically go a long way in making sure all Star Wars fans are on the same page, and that is a good thing. I will also say that we are seeing a new side of Fett in the Tusken sequences. Even though I felt the flashbacks were predictable, we're still seeing him completely out of his element. Boba has been stripped of his armor and his gear, the source of his power. It's easy to be a badass when you've got a flamethrower on your arm, but what kind of person are you when that's all taken away? His fight with the desert monster is him rising to the challenge and proving that Boba Fett is still Boba Fett even without the cool helmet and the jetpack. So now let's jump ahead to the present day where he has his armor back and he's become a crime lord. And he still feels like a fish out of water. This episode is called Stranger in a Strange Land, and obviously that fits for his time spent in the desert with the Tuskens, but it also applies to his new venture into the underworld. He has no idea what he's doing. When the mayor's majordomo demands payment, Boba says, "Why? I'm the crime lord." He saw how Jabba operated, and now that he's on the throne, it's like he just assumes everyone will fall in line. Multiple times he goes against the advice of Fennec Shand. He allows the Gamorrean guards to live. He refuses to be paraded through the streets. He refuses to let Fennec do his dirty work, and he insists on ruling through respect instead of fear. None of these are bad decisions. I'd even argue he has noble intentions, at least as noble as you can get for a crime lord, but he's out of his depth. His decisions result in an attack that does not go well for him. He's publicly beaten in the streets and has to be dragged away by his guards to be healed, while Fennec actually runs off to capture one of their assailants. That cannot be good for his reputation, which, at least in the comics, is very important to the Fett family. I think this episode is all about the struggle to change and reinvent yourself. It's not easy. We've seen that Boba Fett is a man who will overcome struggles and hardship. Take away his armor, and he still proves himself to be powerful. He is ultimately accepted by the Tuskens. In the present day, we're seeing a man who no longer wants to be a bounty hunter. He wants to reinvent himself as a crime lord, and not only that, but he wants to rule his way, not by following anyone else's rules. There's a lot he's trying to change about himself and the world he lives in, and it's not as simple as announcing it. He can't just say, "I'm a crime lord now," and expect everyone to bend the knee. He's gonna have to put in the work. The same way anyone has to put in the work to overcome the worst parts of themselves. You can't just say, "I'm a better person now," and expect applause. You've gotta actually work at it. Writing this review has helped me work through some of my more lukewarm feelings about the premiere episode. I still think the execution could have been a little better in some areas, but at least I'm starting to see the themes more clearly. The parallels of the two time periods of Fett's life are cool. Like I said, I'm reminded a lot of how I felt watching the first episode of The Mandalorian. A little unsure, but on board. And of course, I wound up loving that series once I settled into it. I think I'll have a similar experience with the Book of Boba Fett. I do wish there were a Baby Yoda-style reveal at the end of Stranger in a Strange Land. Not another Baby Yoda, obviously, just some surprise or hook to hint at the shape of things to come. My hope is that we will ease out of the flashbacks as the season continues. He seems to only have those dreams when he's in the Bacta tank. It's kinda like when Din had flashbacks while he was watching his armor be forged, and I doubt Boba's going to need to do that over and over and over. I could see there being a significant time jump with the Tuskens in Chapter 2. Maybe we'll catch up to him finding Fennec in the desert, and we could really focus on their relationship in parallel stories, see how they met, and see how they are evolving as partners. I'm also hopeful the story will eventually make its way off Tatooine. We still have to deal with the mayor, obviously, and there's also like this biker gang or gangs that we've seen in the trailers, and we saw some of them in this episode roughing up settlers and stealing their water. There's probably a decent amount to do on Tatooine. But maybe we can see some other planets after Boba and Fennec secure the immediate area around Jabba's palace. If not, no big deal, because that means more of a chance to see Max Rebo again, whose appearance thrilled me. I am so happy to know he also survived Jabba's sail barge, and he's still out there getting gigs. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett so far. Let me know what you thought down in the comments and what you hope to see in future episodes. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel to keep up with all our Book of Boba Fett coverage, and consider checking out our Patreon page for even more. We've released our video reaction to this episode, and an audio commentary will be coming soon as well. We will be doing that for every episode as they release. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.